Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It's such a pleasure to be able to stop for a few minutes in the middle of our busy week to consider the Word of God. So glad to do that with you tonight. Before we actually get going, digging into the Bible, let's start by praying. Dear Lord our God, we thank you so much for the day you've blessed us with. Lord, you give us so many things that we don't even think about. So many little blessings along the way every day, things that come from your hand that we just forget to thank you for. Thank you so much for our lives, for being able to wake up this morning, and thank you for the food that we've been given. Thank you for our families, both extended and immediate, and the blessing that they are in our lives. Thank you for prayer, our ability to reach out to you and ask for your help, and please help us to do more of that. Thank you for this church and the way we encourage one another, the way that we lift one another up, the way that we can count on one another when we need something that we can't provide for ourselves. We thank you so much for the good brethren in this church who do that for us. Lord, please be with us as we study tonight. Please help our study to be profitable, and please help us to consider your word with honest and open hearts. Please let this word into our hearts and let it change us. Let it affect how we think and how we live our lives, because we know that's the only way we're going to become more like your Son. Please give us strength and wisdom in this. Give us courage. In your Son Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so in this class we're talking about questions from the one with all the answers. So we're talking about the questions that Jesus asked while he was walking around doing his ministry on this earth. We're going to start tonight in Matthew chapter 6. I'll go ahead and ask you to turn there. Matthew chapter 6. And while you're turning there, let's just reiterate what we talked about last class. That was 2 weeks ago, and maybe some of you guys weren't here that are here tonight, or more likely you forgot, because you probably don't even know what I preached on Sunday. Trick question, I didn't. Scared some of you. So we're talking about questions that Jesus asked. And we talked about in the first class that the reason we ask questions is to do what? Why do we ask questions? To get an answer, right? Because I don't know the answer, right? So I ask questions so I can get information, which makes it funny that Jesus would ask questions. Why? Yeah, because he already knew all the answers. And so we talked about why Jesus even bothers to ask questions in the first place. And the point we made is that Jesus asked questions not to gain information. He asked questions so that the person he asked them to would reflect on themselves. He asked questions to start a conversation between a man and his soul, a conversation that man needed to have and that he wasn't having. And so that's what we're doing when we consider the questions of Jesus. He asked us these questions because they're the conversations that we need to have with our souls. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I'm going to start this class without a doubt, what must be the easiest question to answer of all time. What makes you worried? What makes you worried? Come on, anything is at play here. The unknown? Okay. Going with Old Faithful right there, Shannon. Appreciate that. Your children, right? Absolutely. And I would too if I had... I'm kidding. No, we worry about our kids, don't we? And sometimes even irrationally worry about them. I don't even like the fact that my bedroom isn't right next to Ellison's bedroom. It freaks me out. We worry about our kids, absolutely. What else do we worry about? Illness, absolutely. What else? What worries you? Did someone say money? Yeah, absolutely. Worries us a lot, doesn't it? Am I going to have enough? Can I do what I need to do? Am I going to end up bankrupt one day? Is somebody going to steal my finances from me? Is my house going to get hit by a hurricane and the insurance company isn't going to pay for it? Absolutely. Money worries us. What else? What causes you to worry? Yes, hand back there. Our country, absolutely. We have to live here, right? And we worry about the laws that are instilled to make because we worry maybe those laws will make it harder for us to live our lives as a Christian. Anybody else worried about that? Absolutely. And we worry about what's going to happen, and maybe some other foreign power is going to grow up and maybe present a threat to our country. We worry about that. Worry about our way of life. Absolutely. Anything else? Anything else worry you? Yes, sir. Will I be saved? All right. So there are those spiritual worries, right? Those spiritual concerns that we have. Many people worry about that. So worry is a feeling of anxiety or stress or unease about the future. Worry is when we become fearful about the future because the future is, Shannon, unknown and uncertain. That's what worry is. Worry is me feeling anxious or troubled about the future because the future is unknown, the future is uncertain. In fact, that idea of the fact that worry troubles us, it really freaks us out. When you're worried, it means you're really scared, you're shaken, you're anxious, you're not sure what's going to happen. And it's interesting because the word has a neat etymology. Do you know where the word worry comes from? It comes from an old Germanic word. And it's the old Germanic word for when a wolf catches a piece of prey and shakes it with its mouth to break its neck, right? That's where your word worry comes from. And you know what that feels like a little bit, don't you? Because when crazy things are happening in your life and you feel anxious, you feel like you're just being tossed around and you don't know what's going to happen. Worry about the future because the future is uncertain. I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm sure you know this, worry dominates the American mind. Worry is everywhere in our culture. It is pervasive. It is overwhelming. You and I both know that we lived in a stressed out, over-anxious society. So much so, to the point where, depending on who you read, and this is one of the more liberal psychological takes, about 30% of the American population is diagnosed with some kind of anxiety disorder. Think about that. We live in a stressed out and over-anxious society. And as Christians, we ought to stand out in a society like that. We ought to be the kind of people who don't worry like other people do. While other people worry, we should be the kind of people with assurance. We are supposed to be the kind of people who don't fear about the future. And Jesus talked about that while he was on earth. He talked about how fear and uncertainty about the future is not something that a disciple should have in them. He talked about how worry or uncertainty about the future and that fretting, that troubledness that comes from uncertainty, that should not dominate us. It should be something that we overcome. Jesus wants us to live above and beyond worry and anxiety. He tells us it's something that we can overcome. Now, I do want to be perfectly clear. I do not want to be misunderstood. That there are some people who struggle with anxiety in such a way that they require professional therapy or prescribed medication. I want to make sure that I make that very, very clear. That this lesson is in no way intended to be a cure for someone who needs legitimate medical help. And it is in no way intended to be a rebuke of anybody who struggles with anxiety for some kind of neurological reason. Was that clear enough to everybody? Okay. But I do think that we make a mistake when we think that every single instance of anxiety or worry is a medical problem. Anxiety and worry is something that is common to the human experience. It is not just a disorder when I feel anxious. What it is it's a temptation. It's a temptation to lose my faith in God. And I think Jesus helps us see some things in Matthew chapter 6 that help us take that common worry and anxiety that every person is afflicted by and overcome that. So listen to what Jesus said. Matthew chapter 6, verse 25. For this reason I say to you, do not be worried about your life, as to what you will eat or what you will drink, nor for your body as to what you will put on. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air, that they do not sow, nor reap, nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not worth much more than they? And who of you, by being worried, can add a single hour to his life? And why are you worried about clothing? Observe how the lilies of the field grow. They do not toil, nor do they spin. Yet I say to you that not even Solomon in all his glory clothed himself like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today, and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? Do not worry then, saying, what will we eat, or what will we drink, or what will we wear for clothing? For the Gentiles eagerly seek all these things. For your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. So do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will care for itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. So in Matthew chapter 6, we're focusing our question this night is basically going to be, why are you worried? Focusing on that question that Jesus asked. Why are you worried? But notice that there are a lot of questions that he asked in that context, isn't it? Right? He says, is not life more than food? He says, are you not worth much more than they? Who of you, by being worried, can add a single hour to his life? Or why are you worried about clothing? Jesus asks a lot of different questions. And why do you think he asked that question? Why does he ask these people, why are you worried? It's not because he's really seeking to determine the root cause of their anxiety. He knows why they're worried. Why does he ask this question? Yeah, to shift their perspective. Absolutely. Anybody else? Why does he ask this question? Because he can answer it. Very good, very good. Absolutely. Any other thoughts? Why does he ask this question?
As Christians, they have persecution come upon them where some of these things will not be provided because they will lose their jobs, they will lose family connections. Therefore, there's some things in the future that
Okay, yeah. In the future, there are going to be some of these things that he's talking about now that they're not going to have. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But absolutely, he could be talking about this because in the future, they're going to have some things to worry about. Absolutely. Absolutely. Or at least they'll struggle with this in the future when those persecutions come. What I want you to see is that when Jesus asked this question, what he's seeking to stir up in their minds is this question. As a Christian, as someone who trusts in God, is there ever really a good reason to worry? If I really do trust in God, is there a good reason to be anxious about my life? And so that's why he asked the question, why are you worried? Do you really have a good reason to be worried? It's an interesting thought, isn't it? Jesus makes one thing clear in verse 25, right? He says in verse 25, for this reason I say to you, do not be worried about your life. Jesus doesn't want worry to be a part of our lives. He wants us to be calm. He wants us to be certain. He wants us to be trusting. He wants us to have the attitude that is talked about in Philippians chapter 4. You've been there, right? Philippians chapter 4, verse 6. Be anxious for what? Nothing. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Jesus doesn't want us to worry. He doesn't want us to worry. He wants us to have that calm, full assurance. He wants us to be able to look to the future with confidence, even though the future is unknown. Now, why is that so important to Jesus? We're here in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' hallmark sermon, and he decides to talk about worry and anxiety. Why is it so important and fundamental to the Christian that we not worry?
Just a temporary thing. So whatever we worry about that's secular is just passing. we need to worry, or what we need to concentrate on is the eternal.
Yeah, absolutely. What we need to concentrate on is the eternal. Absolutely. The things in this life are just passing through, and so there's no need to really worry about them, is what Ray's saying. Yes, ma'am? Why does he not want us to worry?
When you're worried, you tend to be focused at work, and it's all, you're thinking, it just absorbs your thinking until it's time. If you can get past that, then you've got time to think of others to do, to serve, and you tend to not be doing that when you're so consumed.
Yeah, when I worry, I'm focused on myself. It's a very... In most cases, right, when Melanie says, we sometimes worry about our kids, it's not really selfish, but lots of worry is selfish, right? And you're exactly right about that. I'm thinking more fundamental than that. What's bad about worry? More fundamental.
David said, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want."
Absolutely, absolutely. It shows that we need to have a faith and a trust in God. How about this? We shouldn't worry because worry leads to sin. Have you noticed that before? Y'all agree with that? Say uh-huh or uh-uh. All right, absolutely. That's why he doesn't want us to worry, because worry leads to sin. When we worry, when we fret, when we fear about the future, when we are uncertain, when we lack that assurance, we make bad choices. Can you think of a Bible character that failed because they were worried? Lots of examples of that. Bible character that failed because of worry. Wait, someone said Sarah? You say Sarah? Why do you say that? Yeah, it did, didn't it? Right? Sarah was worried because she wasn't having the baby like God promised, and so she gave Abraham Hagar, right? That's what happens. That's what happens when you start to worry. What else? Bible characters that failed due to worry. Yes, sir. King Saul, right? He's about to go to battle. Right? He's at Michmash, and he sees the Philistines there mustering together, and he's worried because he hasn't offered a sacrifice yet. And before Samuel gets there, he decides, I'm worried. I'm just going to offer the sacrifice myself. Great example. Worry leads to sin. How about Peter? Right? Peter, as he's walking on the water, and he's looking at Jesus, then he worries about the winds and the waves, and he begins to sink. How about Abraham? Abraham with Sarah, right? When they're going on their journeys and they come to that land where Abraham says, there's no fear of God in this place. What's Abraham do? He says, she's not my wife, and he lies because he's worried that they're going to take her and kill him. Jesus doesn't want us to worry, because when we worry, we make, am I allowed to say this? Stupid choices. We make really bad choices when we let worry overwhelm us. And so Jesus says, don't be worried. Don't be the kind of person that worry, because worry gives the devil a foothold in our lives. And so Jesus says, don't worry about your life. Don't worry about your food or your clothing. You just need to trust in God. And what's more, I think when we consider these verses, Matthew 6, 25 through 34, I think it shows us kind of what Ryan was saying, right? That the reason we worry sometimes is because our perspective is off, right? And so that's what I want to show you tonight. In these verses, I want to show you 3 things that your worry proves. 3 things that your worry may prove about you. And hopefully we can see that there's no cause for those who are in Christ to worry. And so first of all, I'd like to say this. That Jesus makes the point that in a Christian, if I'm worried about my life, it may prove that I've lost perspective on what my life is all about. Okay? Can I make that point to you? If I'm worried, it may prove that I've lost perspective on what my life is all about. Matthew 6, verse 25, for this reason I say to you, do not be worried about your life as to what you will eat or what you will drink, nor for your body as to what you will put on. Then he says this, is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? What's he saying there? When he says, is not life more than food, what does that mean? That you are here to do something more important than eat food. Okay? Does everyone agree with that? You are not here to eat food. You have a much higher purpose than that in your life. Right, man shall not live by bread alone. Temptation presented to Christ in Matthew chapter 4, absolutely. But you and me, we were created to be more than food eaters. Don was created to be more than a clothes hanger, although mighty fine clothes hanger, Don. We're created to be more than this. Life is much more profound than eating and drinking and wearing. God created me to do something bigger than that. And so if I'm worried about eating and drinking and wearing and all these little physical things in my life, if I'm worried about that, maybe that means I've kind of lost perspective on why I'm here in the first place. I'm not here to eat food. I'm not here to just take care of a house or mow a lawn. I'm here for something much more important than that. And so Jesus says, it's not life more than food. Don't you think that if God created you, He generated you out of nothing and He sustains you, He holds the whole world together by His power. If He can do that so that you can live a life, don't you think that He'll continue to provide for you? It's like we sometimes think that God is a 5-year-old who wants a puppy, right? Anybody ever had that experience where you have a really small child and they're really excited about getting a puppy, and as soon as you get the puppy, you know what's going to happen? What's going to happen? That's all I hear. Yeah, they're going to lose interest, right? They're going to lose interest in it, and they're not going to take care of it. They're going to feed it for like one day, and then they're going to be like, what else is there to do, right? And it's like sometimes when we worry, that's what we think God is. As if He's some kind of all-powerful being that's going to create us and then forget about us. No, not at all. My life is about glorifying God. It's about lifting Him up. It's about bringing honor to His name. As Paul writes in Galatians 2:20, I've been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life that I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave Himself up for me, right? The life that I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave Himself up for me. We're here to do that. We're here to let Christ live in us. Do I really think that God's not going to take care of me? Do I really think that He's incapable of making sure that I can do what I need to do with my life on this earth? And I think that's what's going on. Sometimes I don't think that we forget about that. I think that we just are so focused on the here and the now and the physical, and we're so focused on the little intricacies of daily life in my world that we forget, we lose perspective. I'm not here to build a business. I'm not here to make money. I'm not here to build a legacy, at least not the kind that a lot of worldly people think about. I'm not here to graduate from school. I'm not here to get married. Those things are good things. And those things are useful things, joyful things, blessings that God provides for some of us, but that's not what life is about. So why would I worry about them? When I'm worried, I need to stop and reassess. I need to remember, what's my life about? Why am I here? And when I remember that the whole reason I'm here is to glorify God in my body, I just need to remember, can I still do that with where I am? And when I stop and reassess, I can realize there's no reason. There's no reason for me to be worried. So first of all, sometimes in a Christian, worry proves that I've lost perspective. I've lost perspective about what life is really all about. Now, in addition to that, let me add this. It may not be that you worry because you've lost perspective on life. It may be, secondly, that sometimes I worry because I lack faith. That's kind of the main thing that Jesus is addressing. Sometimes I worry because I lack faith that God will take care of me. Matthew 6 and verse 26, look at the birds of the air, that they do not sow, nor reap, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not worth much more than they? And who of you, by being worried, can add a single hour to his life? And why are you worried about clothing? Observe how the lilies of the field grow. They do not toil, nor do they spin. Yet I say to you that not even Solomon in all his glory clothed himself like one of these. Jesus says, I want you to look at the birds of the air, and I want you to consider this. Birds aren't worth much. Not worth much at all. But God provides for them. He says, and if you're done looking at the birds, if you want an even better point than that, look at the very grass of the ground that you tramp on. Even worth less than a bird. And God provides for the lilies of the field too. No matter how much I try to mow over them and get rid of them in my yard. Jesus says that we're much more valuable than birds. We're much more valuable than grass. There's no denying that. And I need to think in my life, if God can provide for those less valuable things, then why would we doubt that he would provide for the crown of his creation? Have you ever thought about this? That of all the things that God has created, mankind is the only one that worries. Isn't that funny? Of all the things that God created, mankind is the only one that worries. Plants don't worry, fish don't worry, birds don't worry, no creature worries, not even my dog Lexi worries. Nothing worries. None of them worry about the future. None of them are anxious and uncertain because they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Nothing worries. Only man does that. And Jesus' point in these verses is, it shouldn't be that way. Just like the flower or the bird, we are cared for by an all-powerful creator who holds the world in his hands. This is my Father's world, right? And so I have less reason to worry than the flowers or the birds or the grass. Verse 30. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today, tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? Do not worry then, saying, what will we eat, or what will we drink, or what will we wear for clothing? For the Gentiles eagerly seek all these things. For your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. So, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will take care of itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. It's almost interesting in verse 34, right? Because he talks about the fact that he knows what worry is. He knows what anxiety is. And it is me worrying about something beyond today. Don't worry about tomorrow. You worry about today. Or be concerned about today, right, Ray? Don't worry about tomorrow. Each day has enough trouble of its own. God will take care. God will take care of you. God will take care of the future. And so I need to recognize and I need to admit that if I'm worried about what's going on in my life, it may be that I just don't have the faith in God that I should. It may be that my faith in God needs to grow. Now let me stop and ask that question. What does it mean to have faith? What does it mean to have faith in God? What is faith? Trust. I love that answer. Faith is trust. What else? What's your definition of faith? What is faith? All right, trust in the spiritual, not just in the physical. We're going to get into that. We'll talk about that just here in just 1 second. What is faith? How do you define that? Yes, sir. Yeah, believing he's real and present and active. I like that, right? Because it's not just about believing that God is real. It's about believing that God is working and he can do something for you. Absolutely. I always define faith in this way. It's to trust in what you can't see based on what you can see. It's to trust in what you can't see based on what you can see. You can't see the future and you don't know what's going to happen. But to have faith is to trust that God will handle the future. And we can trust that God will handle the future. He will handle the unknown and the uncertain because we have seen him do that in the past. We can see what he's done in the past and we can be certain that he will take care of the future as well. And so Jesus says, why are you worried? Is there really a good reason to be worried? Should I really be troubled about the future, struggling with all this uncertainty? Knowing that I serve a God who has the whole world in his hands. Now, I do want to make something very clear. I think it's important for us to understand this. Jesus says in verse 33, "But seek first his kingdom, his righteousness, all these things will be added to you." And I think it's important for us to understand what Jesus means when he says all these things. When he says, "Don't be worried, all these things will be added to you," we need to focus on asking ourselves, what exactly is God promising that he will provide? Because we have to appreciate that not every Christian goes through life unscathed. In fact, 0 Christians go through life unscathed. Bad things happen to every Christian. And so what does he mean when he says that he will provide? Because I could look at somebody and I could say, well, this person was a Christian and they went bankrupt. This person was a Christian, they lost their kid. This person was a Christian and they lost their marriage. So God doesn't provide, right? What does he mean when he says all these things? And I think we have to appreciate that Jesus is not promising that we won't die. And he's not promising that we won't die young. He's not promising that we'll live a solid 85 years on earth. He's not promising that our lives will be easy, pain-free, comfortable, or without tragedy. He's not promising that at all. He's promising that God will provide everything we need. And everything we need to do what? Exactly. Glorify him. He's not promising that you'll have everything you need to have a really comfortable retirement, right? Or that you'll have everything you need to have a full family Christmas every year. He's promising you will have all you need in this life to fulfill your purpose, to glorify me with your life. That's the promise. And so when bad things happen to us and tragedies strike, we need to remember that is not an undoing of this promise, because in my life, even when bad things happen, as a Christian, I still have what I need. Because what I need is to glorify God with my life, and he will provide that. You know, it's interesting. You think about, I want you to go with me to John chapter 18. John chapter 18. Yes, sir.
We also got to remember the promise that God did promise, which is our trials and tribulations are given us away. He will provide for us with people, and especially with him, in order for us to see through. And at the end of that path, we will become a better person.
That's exactly right. And that's the whole point is when I go through trials and tribulations, it's not a promise that they won't come. It's a promise that even when you face them, you will have what you need. You'll have what you need to glorify God. I want you to think about that in the life of Jesus. Oftentimes the Bible talks about how cups are given to people to drink. And that's what Jesus talks about when he talks about the fact that he has to go to the cross and he has to die on the cross. He refers to that as the cup God gave him to drink. Okay? John 18, verse 10. Simon Peter then, having a sword, drew it, struck the high priest's slave, and cut off his right ear, and the slave's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, "Put the sword into the sheath. The cup which the Father has given me, shall I not drink it?" And I want you to think about that idea. That God has given each and every single one of us a cup to drink. Every one of us have a cup to drink. We have a life to live with our certain experiences and our certain opportunities, and yes, our certain share of trouble. Every single one of us have a cup to drink. Just like Jesus had a cup to drink. He had his life that God had planned for him, he had his things that God needed him to do with his vessel, with his body, right? God needed him to come to the earth. He needed him to live purely. He needed him to do his ministry, and he needed him to die on a cross to save all mankind, or make it possible for all mankind to be saved. That was his cup, to die on the cross for us. And we have cups too. And I don't know what your cup is going to be. I don't know what your opportunities are going to look like, what your life is going to look like, what your challenges or tragedies are going to look like. But we all have a cup we drink. The promise is that you will have what you need to drink your cup. Not just a solid 85 years of ease on the earth. You will have what you need to glorify God in your body. So, why are you worried? Why are you worried? We have a God who will give us what we need to fulfill our purpose while we live life on this earth. Now, one more thing that I do want to say that I think is very, very important. And this I'm not saying that this is true of you if you worry. This is, as the other two things I've said, it may prove this. I'm not saying it does prove this. But the third thing that I want to say is, if I, as a Christian, am worried, it may prove that I'm too materialistic. Okay? If I'm worried, it may prove that I've lost perspective on my life. It may prove that I don't have the faith in God that I should. Or it may prove that I'm too materialistic. Now, in these verses, in Matthew chapter 6, you'll go back there with me. What does Jesus specifically tell us not to worry about? He says, don't worry about what? Not just things. A little bit more specifically, what does he say? Food, life, clothes. Is that it? Oh, drink. Drink's in there too, right? Food, life, drink, clothes. What are those things? Okay, daily living, sure. Physical, yes. I'm thinking an inward. Needs, necessities, that's what they are, right? He did not say, don't worry about, playing your Xbox, right? We're talking about needs. We're talking about necessities in life. Food, drink, clothes. Is that what you worry about? Do you worry about what you're going to eat? Who here worried about whether or not dinner was going to be on the table? Or whether or not their glass would be full of something to drink? Or whether or not they're going to have clothes tonight? Anybody worried about that? Nope. None of us are worried about that. And so I have to be honest with you guys. I think that a lot of the time we come to this context, Matthew chapter 6, and we come to this context to have a very different conversation than Jesus actually intended to have. Jesus comes to this crowd of people who are legitimately worried about food and drink and clothes, who are legitimately worried about whether or not their necessities are going to be provided. When Jesus is conversing with these people, he is talking to people whose families literally could be wiped out by a famine. He is talking to people whose clothes had holes in them. He's talking to people who didn't have a favorite shirt. They just had a shirt. And it is to that crowd that Jesus says, do not worry about your life. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? And we open up Matthew chapter 6, and we hear Jesus say, don't worry. And we say, what Jesus is telling us is, don't worry about your stuff. Don't worry about those nice physical possessions you have. Don't worry about all the luxuries that you enjoy. And that's not at all the conversation he's really having. I'm not saying that all worry is a sign of materialism. Great example. This is written in my notes, Melanie, so I'm not picking on you. But when I worry about the faith of my kids, right, that is not a materialistic worry. When I worry about the health of my local church family, that is not a materialistic worry, okay? But a lot of the worry that we do, a lot of it is about our stuff. And so I want you to think for a moment tonight about the things that truly make you anxious. What really troubles you? What really makes you anxious? And once you've done that, and you've thought about what really makes you anxious, I want you to ask yourself this question. Is the answer to my anxiety Matthew 6:25-34, or is the answer to my anxiety really Matthew 6:19-21? Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And I think we need to think about that. That when Jesus talks about worry here in Matthew 6:25-34, he's not really telling us, you have all these nice physical possessions. Don't worry, everything's going to be fine. He's talking to people who don't have that, and he's talking about necessities. And he's talking about, he's helping people understand that they'll have what they need to glorify God with their lives. And I think more often than not, with people who live in our culture, with our mentality, we don't need to hear Jesus say, do not be worried. More often we need to hear Jesus say, don't store up treasures on earth. Because those are the treasures we're really worried about. Not the stuff that they were worried about in Matthew chapter 6:25-34. So maybe my worry, not saying it does, but maybe my worry proves that I am too connected, I am too concerned with physical stuff. Maybe my worry proves that I've set my mind on things below rather than on things above. Whatever the case, I do think it's important to point out that Satan, when it comes to worry, Satan only tries to get us to worry in one of two ways. He either tries to get us to obsess over things that don't matter, or he tries to get us to doubt that God will provide the things that do matter. It's the only way he's going to get you when it comes to worry, to obsess over things that don't matter, or to doubt that God will provide the things that do. And so let me ask you tonight, why are you worried? Maybe it's a loss of perspective on what your life is all about. Maybe it's because you've lost faith in God, or maybe it's just that we're too wrapped up in worldly treasure. Whatever the case, Jesus' question stands. Why are you worried? Is there a good reason? Is there a good reason for you to be anxious? Or should we be calm and assured, knowing that because we're Christians, because we're in Christ, we serve the all-powerful creator of the universe who's promised to care for us. And within his grace, there is no room. There's no room for worry. That is our lesson for tonight. That's all I got for you. Next Wednesday, we're going to be talking about another question, a question that we find in Matthew chapter 15, where Jesus said to the Pharisees, "Why do you yourselves transgress the commandment of God for the sake of your tradition?" So hopefully you guys will be back. Lord willing, we'll be back, and we'll be talking about that question, which is a very important question, very interesting question. And I look forward to talking to you guys about that then.